Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. Good morning, colleagues and comrades. I will open with one of the things that Steve always used to say. His great refrain was working together, winning together. And that is what we need to be doing in the trade union movement. Paul gave me a few bullet points that I need to speak to, but Francis has already elegantly covered most of them, but never mind, I'll just amplify them. The really important thing about trade unionism is that we need to be working together locally, as education unions do, of course, all across the country, regionally, as we're doing in our UMF project through the NUT, looking at fairer futures and trying to encourage equality reps and officers, nationally, where all the teachers' unions are engaged in political campaigns about ending child poverty and anti-privatisation, as well as working on our own bread and butter issues, and of course, internationally. This year, I spent my holiday in the States so that I could spend some time with teacher trade unions over there, and I picked up, as I have when I've been there before, some very interesting ideas about organising in a context which is in some ways strikingly similar to ours, but of course in other ways remarkably different from what goes on in Britain. The challenges posed by privatisation are of course reflected everywhere in the US as elsewhere. In fact, the writ of the neoliberal agenda seems to run pretty large in most countries these days. One of the very early, stealthy and almost unnoticed privatisations in education was that of our supply teacher members. And there is still a very significant challenge for us, supported through the TUC, to address the issue of the agency worker status of many of our supply members. They find themselves, in quotes, employed. Of course, they're not really employed through agencies. And we really do have to get out there and seek to challenge the fact that those agencies are trying to depress their pay and erode their salaries on a daily basis. But before we go there, just let's have a quick look at the positives about organising in what is still largely the public sector. We don't, of course, in most of the school sectors, have an issue about recognition. We are recognised, and teachers are a very highly organised, unionised sector of the workforce. But that doesn't mean that there isn't still an awful lot for us to do. Clearly, there are still very many teachers who are, and other people in the education workforce, who are not in unions, or should I say not yet in unions. And there are plenty of schools, unfortunately, too, where there is no really obvious, visible union presence. So those are the things that we have to address. And research, both in my union but also in other places, has shown that face-to-face contact is obviously key in recruiting members. A few years ago, we produced a little leaflet that had the title, "No One Ever Asked Me." And guess why? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's because that was the #1 response that people made when they were asked why they were not or not yet in a union. No one ever asked me. So it's clear that we can't develop activists unless we have them in membership. So recruitment is clearly a very big job for us still to do. But once we've got them, we need to be promoting active rather than passive membership. And to do this, we need to make sure we have a contact in all of our workplaces, the face and the voice of the union. And in the NUT, of course, that means a school rep in every school, in every pupil referral unit, in every place that NUT members may work. And not just one rep, but possibly 2 or 3, you know, the old safety in numbers idea. But to begin to accomplish that, we've had to ask ourselves some questions. What are the barriers to people either joining the union or eventually becoming a workplace rep? Are they to do with age? Are they to do with gender, as we're going to discuss in a workshop later? Are they cultural? Are they, in the case of teachers, to do with workload, which they might very well be? And what are the structures that may prevent them from becoming a rep? Is it to do with too little information? Is it to do with too much information? Is it to do with isolation? What is it that we're doing? Is it to do with simply not asking them in the way that we didn't ask them to join? Are we not asking them to step up and be a rep? And is it to do with essentially the organisation of our own unions? Are we actually inclusive? Are we making them want to be a rep? And the answers to these questions are, of course, instructive and give us an indication of the starting point for a strategic approach to building our base of activists. As I said earlier, I spent the summer in the States and I picked up some very useful ideas. Not very many of our workplace reps in our schools have very much facility time. unlike those of us who spent years and years in the trade union movement, some of those workplace reps are actually still quite nervous volunteers. So when I was looking through the things that the late Paul Wellstone, Democratic senator, who had a particularly interesting and active approach to organising, mostly in electoral politics, but highly appropriate to the trade union sector, when I was looking at what he was saying, I thought it was quite interesting to just read you a bit about the kinds of ideas that he had about volunteers. He says the first step, or rather people writing about what he says say, the first step in building a base is to understand the importance of your volunteers. Volunteers are the heart and soul of grassroots organising. They create momentum, they put a human face on the campaign, they're crucial to expanding the base. When volunteers are treated the right way, they feel a sense of ownership, they become activists, and what's more, they become leaders, and they add vitality and energy to the work of organising. Now, I think that's critical to us, and that's absolutely what we can see coming through all of the things that you've seen on the screen and the things that you've heard from Francis this morning. So it's really important for those of us, whether we're at national level or at regional level, wherever we are, to make sure that we understand that we need to support and train all of our people so that they can stay with us. When volunteers are treated the right way, they feel a sense of ownership, they become activists and leaders, and they add vitality. I think that's a really key idea. I think we've probably all, as we saw from the film, moved on from the whole idea of servicing versus organising. Organising is something we have to do, but we still have to provide services to members. So the crucial thing is to make sure that we have the services embedded within the organising culture. So they're not at opposite polar ends, but they are actually working well together so that the use of our services, the collective approach, the support for our reps actually builds together to make sure that everybody feels part of an active union. In the old days in education, we could rely on a few highly skilled local officers to do all of our local negotiations with local education authorities, as they were called in those days, and probably to do quite a lot of the casework. Now, local management of schools, the privatisation through trusts and academies, have changed all that. Now we need people on the ground, we need schools-based organisations, and effectively there is a challenge there to all teacher unions and other education unions to work together. We didn't want plant bargaining, it's been wished on us, but now that we've got it, we've got to do it as well as we possibly can. And of course, working together through the TUC, we have created a model recognition agenda. Academies, the privatisation of schools through the creation of academies, creates for us that area that we never really had, the need to make sure that our members are actually in recognised unions. So working together through the TUC, all of the teachers' unions have created a model recognition agreement. And of course, we're also working together to see if we can actually stop the academies being created through the Anti-Academies Alliance. And that provides a base of activism again to make sure that we get engaging our members in all of those anti-privatisation campaigns. And I must say, all of the unions involved in education speak with one voice on that, as we're absolutely clear that the threat to the breakup of state education is a very, very, very serious threat. I want to just move to the conclusion of my remarks by saying that I absolutely have the highest possible praise for the Leading Change programme as part of this organising academy. I was very pleased to have been able to be a participant in that. And it's challenged my union, not just my participation in that, but the organising academy generally, has challenged my union to think differently about how we do things. We've always known that numbers count, but now we know it's not just numbers, but it's about what you do with those numbers that also counts. And we need to make sure, and the work with the organising academy has refocused us on having a strategy for organising and growing our activists. It's been an enormous help in getting us to think through those ideas and come up with our own approach about how we do this. Inevitably, there is a debate about mainstreaming versus, is it just the job of the organiser? I think the answer is actually, it is everybody's business. There are even stump questions, even still in my union, about what does it really mean? What is this organising agenda? You know, I mean, I hope it's not only in the NUT this happens, but there are still questions about that. But what is true is that we've been able to engage in those questions through our work with the Organising Academy. So I want to conclude by saying happy 10th anniversary to everybody. A tremendous amount of fantastic work has been done through the Organising Academy. But of course, there is still a very great deal to do if we're going to make sure that we really do build stronger unions locally and globally. Francis referred to this. While I was in the States in the summer, I bought a badge from the AFL-CIO. I should have worn it today. It says, "United we bargain, divided we beg." I also bought a rather nice bumper sticker that said, "Trade unions, the defence for the working person." And I think it's absolutely right. So, colleagues, educate, agitate, organise. Thank you.